Welcome back, friends. Dan and Tim here with the Banners Fly Forever football podcast. It is the end of wave one of free agency. A lot of players have found homes, a few trades have gone down. What better time than now for our very first dueling mock draft on the channel? Before we get started, Tim, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. It's a pretty exciting time. We're toying around with the idea of mock drafts a little ahead of free agency, but I think until you get free agency, through that first kind of week, you really have no idea where some of these teams are looking to go in the draft, and the picture becomes a little bit clearer. I think if we had mock draft a week ago, almost all of our picks, not all of them, but almost all of them would have a very different feel to it. Landing
The uh
spots
the, the
versus
the draft order wouldn't even been right a week ago.
Absolutely, exactly, absolutely. So, yeah, I mean, it's the closer you get to the draft, the more accurate the mocks are going to be. But definitely after the new league year starts and teams are starting to look a little more what they're going to be in 2024 is where we go, okay, here's the holes that we actually have to fill on this roster. So I'm really excited because this exercise I think is really fun, especially if you are further in the draft, a fan of a team, because you kind of see like what might be on the board now because it shifts so dramatically as we go through the process. So
And
I'm really
especially if you're a Bears fan, looking
yeah,
down the hole with two top 10 selections.
absolutely, yeah, four total picks in the entire draft, two of them in the top 10. So yeah,
Make him count. If you only have a couple, make him
exactly,
count.
exactly. So yeah, I'm very excited to start this up. And with that, I guess I can kick it off. We're gonna go back and forth. I'll be taking the odd picks, and Dan will be taking the even picks. For somehow I landed with the odd picks with 1 and 9.
Who
But
would have
yeah,
thought?
who would have thought?
It's like we plan these things ahead of time.
Absolutely. So I'm going to go ahead and hit start draft here and get our draft board up. We can obviously see in the PFF mock draft simulator that we're using. They give you options of different teams that might be interested in trades, but we're going to be managing every single trade. So every single team. So if we do a trade, I think we're going to kind of talk that out and force it through ourselves. But I don't think the Bears are moving off this pick. The weird thing going on right now is just what's happening with Justin Fields, right? It's now 4 days into the new league year, and he's still on the Bears roster. So this wasn't really expected once the combine kind of went through, and it was like, it seems like the Bears are going quarterback. It seems like they're going Caleb Williams of the quarterbacks. But Justin Fields hasn't found a new home yet. There's some skepticism that anyone wants to have him as a starter out there. And then there's also some rumors out there that maybe the Bears are holding on longer until they are totally set and for sure on who they're going to draft, because they haven't actually seen Caleb Williams perform on a field as he didn't perform at the combine, and his pro day isn't until next week. So it's kind of up in the air right now, and a lot of teams have filled out their spots for their quarterbacks, moving around even just backup quarterbacks. The most likely scenario seems maybe like Pittsburgh now, with the Steelers moving both Mason Rudolph and Kenny Pickett off their team, and they literally only have Russell Wilson on the squad right now. So that could be the destination, but I do think this is the Bears drafting a quarterback and finding a new home for Justin Fields. So, I mean, I don't really need to go too long with this. I think it is going to be Caleb Williams, and that's what I'm going to put on for the Bears in our mock draft.
Perfect. I love it. All right, so I am up next with the Washington Commanders at the second overall pick. And it's funny because I feel like 2 months ago, this was kind of like lockstep, 1-2, 1-2,
Yeah.
1-2. And there's a lot of discourse now,
Yeah,
who
for sure.
is QB2 currently in the rankings. I know for myself, Drake May is still quarterback 2.
Mm-hmm.
Tim, based on our conversations, I believe you are still in that camp as
I am as
well.
well. I don't know why he keeps getting this like talk of not being as mobile as some of the other people in the draft. Because when you watch his tape, it's like this guy can move and stuff too. So whenever they're talking about, Marcus Mariota's there, and so they're definitely gonna be going for a more mobile type quarterback. It's like Drake May is mobile.
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
like,
know.
have you watched
Have you
any North
watched
Carolina
anything?
game?
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, Washington. I mean, they've even gone as far as shipping Sam Howell, out.
Right.
So it's going to be a quarterback. If I'm choosing the quarterback, it's going to be Drake May.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, we're having more of a conversation as we get closer to draft time. Jaden, I think, is a very nice prospect.
Mm-hmm.
Um, then it's the whole, 1 year production, versus a career of production,
Right, right.
and that seems to be a theme of this class. 'Cause, you got Bo Nix, you got Michael Penix Jr., and Jaden Daniels, who their final season of college was their best season of college.
Hmm.
And funnily enough, for all three of those players, it took going to a different school to
Right.
get to that point. And now you got Drake May, who, yes, this year was a down year for him, but he also lost a lot of his better weapons. And his best
Absolutely.
receiver, Tez Walker, was out the first 6 weeks of the season.
Hmm.
So for me, this seems like a no brainer. It should be Drake May. I'm definitely going to go ahead and select Drake May here.
Okay.
But I don't think Jaden Daniels will be far behind when we
Yeah.
go through this exercise.
The one thing I was going to ask you is, do you take any stock in the fact they moved Sam Howell, and that was Drake May's college, roommate and teammate, and that the talk for a long time was they're going to bring in Drake May and he'll have his buddy there in the quarterback room with him, but now they moved Howell. Is there anything to
It
read into there?
it's funny because I haven't literally thought about that till you just mentioned it.
Mhm.
I'm not sure what the dynamic is there.
Yeah,
I think it's just them getting good value
right.
out of a player who obviously doesn't have much of a future in that team, outside of a backup role.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think they are going to go quarterback as well. And you want Drake May locked in here, right?
Yeah, lock in Drake May.
Yeah. So I think they're going to go quarterback as well. It's probably going to be between May and Daniels all the way till the end. The only thing I've heard a few people talk that is kind of interesting is Adam Peters is there now. He comes from San Francisco. They've kind of had this long run of having quarterbacks that weren't top of the draft quarterbacks leading their way into having success. And someone I was listening to an interview, I think, with Diana Rossini, and she was mentioning how some of these GMs, they go into a place and they're a first time GM and they're like, I want to wait on the quarterback a little bit, because if I commit to my quarterback the first year and it doesn't work out, that it hurts my stock being, the successful GM at my new team pretty quickly.
Yeah, there
Um,
is there is a certain thing to say that when a general manager drafts a quarterback, it's almost like the contracts are linked at that point.
exactly.
It's
Yep.
almost like your new career as his general manager is now linked to this kid, and you are going to live or die by how good of a prospect he is.
Exactly. And so if they're feeling that a little bit and they're like, look, we have a great package to trade down in this draft, I could see them trading out of it, but I just think there's a couple really good quarterbacks at the top of this draft, and I think ultimately they're going to stick there, just like the Bears are at 1. So I'm up again now at number 3 with the Patriots. Again, it feels like this is going to be a quarterback. It kind of has shaped that way through most of their moves as well. Bringing in Jacoby Brissett feels like that perfect bridge quarterback if you need, but also a quarterback to learn under. With Brissett being, how many teams is this now for him? Like 5, 6.
Well, this is his original
And,
team.
and his return to New
Yeah,
England, exactly. So I feel like it's a different New England, like with the
it
non-Bill
definitely is.
Belichick England,
Definitely,
it might as
definitely
well
new face New England.
be a new team. So, but it is interesting to see what that new era is going to be outside of having Bill Belichick. I mean, if this was Belichick still still making decisions on the draft board, I would feel like he'd be like, let's trade back. I want to trade back. I want to, get as many picks as I can out of this. And there's plenty of teams that are further down this list that are talking about trying to get up there. I mean, we have 3 teams in the Vikings, the Broncos, and the Raiders that I think are all very interested in trying to get into the top 10, especially the top 3 if they can get to where Jaden Daniels is. But ultimately, I do think the Patriots are going to stick here. I think they have to get themselves a much better quarterback in there. They've already moved Mac Jones to Jacksonville. Bailey Zappi had his chances, didn't really do a whole lot. So I think they're going to go with Jaden Daniels here. I just think it's, again, too good of value at the top of the draft, and you never know when you're going to be that high up in the draft again. When you're seeing how much teams are trying to trade to get up to your pick, it's like, we better just take the quarterback while we have the chance to do it. So that's what I'm going to go with here at 3.
Yeah, and it does bring up a interesting discussion because I was thinking about it, this morning and yesterday. So obviously Minnesota made that move to go and grab a second first round pick from
Mhm.
Houston. So they're picking at 11 and 23, I believe.
Right.
And a trade into the first round this early in the process kind of signals to me that they are just acquiring ammo to do another trade up.
Sure,
Because
exactly.
right now, because they don't know who's going to be on the board right now at
Right.
23. They don't know what they're actually trading up for. So I feel like it's similar to San Francisco
Hmm.
a couple years with Trey Lance. Like they were trading up to the third pick, so they didn't know what they were trading up for,
Yeah.
but they knew they were trading up for a quarterback. So
Hmm.
I feel like Minnesota is acquiring more draft capital. But my second question is, where is the entry point, for that
Sure.
quarterback?
Exactly.
Because you just talk through the whole process with New England. I think New England might be the best spot to trade back.
Hmm.
Um, because I'm up here with the Cardinals. Spoiler alert, I'm going to go with Marvin Harrison Jr. But that being said, I don't see the Cardinals trading out of that pick.
Right.
Especially if you look at they traded away Rondell Moore.
Hmm.
Marquise Brown is on the Chiefs, so
Right.
you got Michael Wilson is the wide receiver one there.
Yeah.
You have a big hole at wide receiver, and you
Right.
happen to have one of the best wide receiver prospects in the last decade just falling into your lap.
Yeah.
So I don't see. And the other thing is, like, you got to look at the Cardinals and kind of like their competitive alignment.
Right.
Kyler is not on a rookie contract; he's on his second term, his second contract. So it's time for the Cardinals to start competing.
Right.
It's not time to like let's trade back again, acquire more draft capital. Let's
Exactly.
push it back in. Like it's time to go get a stud and start competing a little bit. So I
Yeah.
don't see Arizona trading out.
And they traded back last year. I mean, so like
Yeah,
Monty Osifort, they traded back and then traded back up in the draft, but they got out of the Will Anderson slot and gained some capital last year. So it's kind of that, how many years do you want to be trading back out of premier position spot when a generational wide receiver prospect is there and you need a wide receiver, you know?
and then the next thing, like we'll talk about with your pick, but you have the Chargers, who up until earlier this week was another great trade back spot. Because they
Hmm.
had a very solid roster, but
Yes.
obviously the cap has played hell with their finances.
Yeah.
And now they're left with just Quentin Johnson as wide receiver one, which that doesn't feel great.
Yee.
So I feel like the Chargers went from like a
Go get
definite
Josh
trade
Palmer out
back.
there.
They went from like a definite trade back to like, oh, there's three really good receivers. We
Hmm.
should stick and pick. And you go down further down the board. Giants wide receiver, quarterback. Titans are dying for a tackle.
Hmm.
And then it's Atlanta is the
Hmm.
next spot to trade
Right.
up at
Right.
8. And what are you looking at? Quarterback 4. So
Right.
obviously we'll talk more as we get into it, but I just wanted to put my thoughts out there that it's hard to pick a spot where the trade up is going to occur that everybody seems to be penciling in for
Sure.
Minnesota right now.
I think also the question is what trade up it's for what quarterback, because to get up to 3 versus to get up to maybe, I mean, the ones we were just naming here, 4, 5 at the Cardinals and the Chargers both might be in the wide receiver range. The Giants could go JJ McCarthy. They might not go JJ McCarthy. So like if you're looking to get up for McCarthy, it's going to cost a lot less to get up to maybe 8 with Atlanta than it's going to cost to get up to 3 to get to Jaden Daniels. And so it also depends on what these teams are willing to spend to get up into that quarterback range. So if they're not like, I'll give you my next 3 first round picks, a la what San Francisco did to get up to 3 for Trey Lance years ago, I think it's going to be, probably more in that 6, 7, 8 range that we're looking at. But yes, we'll lock in Marvin Harrison. I think you already said that, and that's the very obvious pick here. If they're sticking. So I'm up now with the Chargers at 5. So the Chargers, yes, like you mentioned, they cut Mike Williams. They traded away Keenan Allen to the Bears. They don't have a lot of options as far as pass catchers go. But also the Chargers, they have Jim Harbaugh now as, excuse me, as their head coach. And who did they bring in to be their offensive coordinator? None other than Greg Roman, who loves to run the ball. And it does feel like maybe they're not going to say we have to have a wide receiver here, that we're kind of having a more rebuilding year to reshape what this roster looks like to build out what we want to be running offensively and defensively. So while I think Malik Neighbors is a smart pick here, I love Malik Neighbors in this draft, and he'd be a great weapon for Justin Herbert to throw to. I'm not completely convinced that Harbaugh wouldn't want to move back in this draft as well. I know he's not the final decision maker here, but that I think he has a pretty big say in the room, but that they're not going to say, look, I want to move back. I want to be taking offensive linemen. I want to be taking guys that are going to open up holes for us to run the ball because we're going to establish, the trenches and get ourselves in shape to be a tough team to beat in this very tough division. The one thing that's interesting with that, though, is the teams that we were mentioning, if they were going to want to trade back, if they're going to get top value out of it, right, for a team trading up for quarterback, these three teams, Minnesota, Denver, and Las Vegas, are the three teams most likely to want to trade up, and two of them are in your division. So it gets a lot harder if you want, Denver or the Raiders to be coming up because you're giving them a quarterback. So the more likely scenario if the Chargers are going to trade back is they're going to be dealing with Minnesota and Minnesota alone. So they may think, look, there just isn't great options for us in the trade back. So let's go ahead and just take the best guy here. Now, again, I was saying this could be them wanting to build up the offensive line. So I think Joe Alt is also on the table here, but it doesn't make a ton of sense with their current roster to be bringing in the best left tackles. So, I mean, it'd be more of right tackle, I think they'd be aiming at. And so I think this is a little early. So I'm going to take Malik Neighbors here. I know it's a long way around to take what was probably going to be the pick anyway, but I just think Neighbors is too good to pass up.
I agree. Yeah. That being said, yeah, they need help at wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
Quentin Johnston, you would love to see a second year breakout out of him, but I don't think him being the alpha is going to facilitate that breakout occurring.
Right.
Right. He couldn't even find a role facing the third corner on most defenses.
Absolutely.
I don't see him being that much more productive facing the first corner.
Right.
So I think Malik Neighbors is a great pick here. And, you picture Justin Herbert's cannon and Malik Neighbors' speed.
Yeah.
It's a great 1-2 pairing.
Absolutely.
So that leaves me with the New York Giants at pick 6. And this is another interesting conversation.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of people in the New York media saying, don't be surprised if Daniel Jones never takes another snap for the Giants again.
Wow.
Because
man, that's so surprising to me. But yeah, I mean, I understand, but man.
Because there is a injury guarantee built into his contract.
Okay.
And if he were to get injured during the season, the Giants would be on the hook for another $30 million for Daniel Jones.
Yeah.
And that's just it's such a huge risk. And you look at his career and you look at his sample size. And yes, that 2022 season was great. The first year with Dable, they made the playoffs, they beat the Vikings. This past year was terrible, both from an injury standpoint, a turnover standpoint, and him and Sam Howell are going back and forth, trying to set the sack record for quarterbacks.
Right.
And then you look at 21, 20, there is a bigger sample size of Daniel Jones not being the answer. And unfortunately, the Giants decided to pay him based off of the one small sample size where he was the answer.
Right.
Now,
it's rough. I mean, but I guess the thing where I was saying I was surprised of him never taking a snap again is look, last year was awful. But it was in 6 games, and 6 games where that entire team was awful. And you just paid him a 4-year, $160 million contract. It's where was the commitment a year ago this time that we're he's completely done a year later after 6 games of football? That it just seems like a huge shift that dramatically to be able to pay a guy 4 years, $160 million and then switch over to being yep, never a snap again.
So that being said, I was going to bring up my counterpoint.
Sure.
You have this money invested in Daniel Jones, and you did see success out of him. And last year was rough.
Yep.
Sacks are sometimes a QB stat. Sacks are sometimes not a QB stat. That offensive line was cheeks. One of the worst in the league, and they're already investing in places to try to improve it. They brought in Jermaine Illuminor to play right tackle.
Right.
This class has some really good offensive linemen. I think right now with the Illuminor signing, they're looking for more interior, center guard position. It's too early for, your top center, your top guard to come off the board as much as you love JPJ. It's still too early for him.
Right.
So how else can you help a Daniel Jones in this year because this is his year. You know, if
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
doesn't show that 2022 form again, then the Giants are off and they're
Exactly.
done.
Yeah.
So, long story short, the Giants are going with my wide receiver too, Rome Odunze, um,
Okay.
to give Daniel Jones like an actual weapon because let's remember, like it's kind of just a collection of slot receivers and field stretchers up to this point. You
Yeah.
know, there is no alpha who's going to beat you off the line, who's
Hmm.
going to be a technician when it comes to route running, and who can just out physical people.
Hmm.
And you know, Roma Dunze is that. I comp him to kind of like similar to a Keenan Allen. You know, and
Yeah.
Keenan Allen is probably one of the best wide receivers that we've had
Yeah.
in the NFL the past decade when
Absolutely.
he's healthy. So we bring in Rome at 6. Hopefully, that with the offensive line changes, you know, the Giants get a little bit more value out of that Daniel Jones contract.
Absolutely. I like the pick. I think my biggest thing is I think it'd be kind of crazy to take a quarterback at this spot. I think, especially like I think I'm not saying JJ McCarthy can't be successful, but I think grabbing JJ McCarthy at 6 is kind of reaching due to need, um, which they did with Daniel Jones. So
Well, I
it's the
mean, we'll get into McCarthy, you know, a little bit
of
because he will
course.
go first round at some point. But
Exactly.
the thing is, McCarthy, he has to sit a year.
Hmm.
I don't think enough people are talking about that. Like he
Hmm.
really does. Like he's young, which is great, but he really does need to sit a year
Right.
and learn an NFL offense.
Right.
Because you know his biggest knock has been like, oh, Michigan was so run first, like it's not really an
Yeah.
NFL offense. So that guess what? He's going to have to learn when he gets into the league. So you know, I don't want to tie us up too much about the talk because we'll do it later. But
Yeah.
you know, this is too high for a quarterback who is required to sit for his first year.
Absolutely. So I'm up at 7 here with the Titans. We haven't had a trade up so far, and I mean, I am tempted once again with these teams trying to get up for McCarthy. But I think the Titans, when those phone calls are coming in, they're going to go like, "No, this board fell exactly how we wanted it to. We want Joe Alt. We want to boost our offensive line. They've done everything they possibly could. It feels like in free agency to say we are giving Will Levis the chance to be our quarterback, and we're going to find out what we have in him. And if we don't, then we will figure out the quarterback at another time. They're not going to go quarterback or anything here. Levis is going to be the guy. And when you bring in Calvin Ridley to pair along with DeAndre Hopkins and Treylon Burks, and you have Tony Pollard with with Tajay Spears. Maybe I should have said that the other way around. Sorry. And you've kind of built the interior of the line with Cushenberry being a free agent signing, Skoronski being your pick last year in the first round. I think Joe Alt falling to them is like a no doubter, and I'm not even going to kind of take time on this one again. This just seems
No,
like the easiest pick.
this is the easiest pick, the easiest
Absolutely.
pick of the draft. I mean, the Titans have done, like you said, brought everything to prove that Will Levis is the guy. You know, like the offensive line, like you know, I'm looking at their lineup right now, and they've kind of with this pick just completely flipped it.
Hmm.
You know, 180,
Absolutely.
which we talked about during the free agency show. Like you know, the Titans are investing in the right spots, and they brought in the best coach to help develop these guys. So
Right.
I think out of all the picks in the top 7 so far,
Yeah.
besides one, I think this was the easiest pick to make.
Absolutely. I agree.
So now that brings us to Atlanta,
Hmm.
which another pick that got a lot more interesting
Yeah.
after free agency. You know, because quarterback, 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 and now they have Kirk Cousins, and okay, we got options. You
Yep.
know, we're not stuck into the quarterback position.
Yep.
And if it's okay with you, I think I would like to do a trade here.
I love the idea of a trade. I mean, it wasn't even just quarterback. I think after Kirk Cousins signed there, like the immediate mock drafts after that were wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver. But now Darnell Mooney and Rondale Moore both going there makes that even more sketchy. So yeah, I love the idea of a trade. So let
Yeah.
me pull up the
So,
trade.
oh look,
Oh,
they
look who
already
wants to
know.
come up.
They already know. So Minnesota, I think this is the spot where Minnesota makes their move.
Hmm.
You know, and they're going from 8 to 11.
Hmm.
Does that require pick 23?
It's a
I
good
don't think so.
question. I
I
don't
don't
think
think
so
so.
either. It's not that big of a jump to warrant it. But I mean, the Falcons could say, you know, we want 23 and we'll be giving you 43 back or something. So 23 could get involved, but it would have to be something else coming from the Falcons.
Yeah, so just for the sake of this scenario,
Yeah.
let's just say 11, 108. and then next year's third.
Okay.
I think that's a fair basis. And listen, in the comments, if you guys want to roast our trades, feel free. There's going to be a million of these fantasy trades,
Absolutely.
the past month. So we're
But
not going
you
to
are in
waste
this
our.
range. I mean, like the Bears last year moved from 9 to 10. I know that was one pick. They moved from 9 to 10 for a fourth round pick, one future fourth round pick. So I mean,
Yeah.
this is
So
this is good value.
we're not going to get lost in the sauce about the trade details. But what's more importantly is that Minnesota is coming up to 8, and this is where McCarthy goes, right?
Absolutely. So let's go ahead
I
and push the trade through here, and
So
we will.
I know we just 2 picks ago were saying like how it was too early for JJ McCarthy, but um, Minnesota is not going to be the only team calling
Mhm.
Atlanta,
Right.
for this pick. It's going to be Denver, and it's probably going to be the Raiders to a certain extent.
Mhm.
Um, so you're bouncing over the Bears, you're bouncing over the Jets, two teams not taking a quarterback, obviously,
Mhm.
but that's not who you're trying to beat out.
Right.
You're trying to beat out the other quarterback needy teams.
Right.
And for Minnesota, it's nice because you still have pick 23. So
Absolutely.
you can still get yourself a defensive back or an edge rusher. But for now, we're going to select JJ McCarthy with the 8th overall pick here.
Yes.
And I know I just talked about him having to sit for a year,
Mhm.
you know, and it's going to be behind Sam Darnold,
Right.
which I'm sure Minnesota fans are not thrilled about. And I'm sure we're going to hear start JJ, week 4, week 5,
Yeah.
depending
Pretty
on how
early.
Sam does. But I think this is the right spot. I think it's a good use of draft capital of Minnesota. They get to bring in a new quarterback, most importantly on a rookie deal,
Mhm.
so that Jefferson extension, is good to go now. Because you extend Jefferson for what, 4 or 5 years,
Right.
for what's he going to make, 32 million a year or something like
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
Those 4 or 5 years, you now have a cheap quarterback.
Exactly.
So then by the time McCarthy is ready for a re-upped contract,
Right.
Jefferson is also ready for a re-upped contract, and then they can approach those contracts together,
Exactly. But
at
now
the same
Jefferson's
time.
28 instead of being 24, so
Yeah,
it's not gonna have to be
exactly.
the amazing huge contract. So yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, so JJ McCarthy here, number 8 to the Minnesota Vikings. And now you're back on the clock with your Bears.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Bears, it's gotten very interesting because the spots they filled in free agency, it feels like what they have left to fill is another defensive end. So my gut is that we are in kind of the Dallas Turner, Jared Verse, Leo Tulatu range. Latu's kind of the one that is, I think the third of that list for me. But Ryan Poles, the Bears GM, historically loves mega athletic guys. It's like in his DNA to draft dudes that are high athletic profiles. It's how Velus Jones Jr. became a third round pick. So there is the possibility of that. But also, the other side of this is the Bears are also in a position here where they might consider trading back. We talked about at the top of the show, they have 4 picks in the entire draft. So they have 1, 9, and then a third and a fourth rounder. So trading out of 9 and trading back to maybe recoup a second rounder to get yourself another spot in this draft isn't something I'd be totally stunned by. There are a lot of good offensive linemen and edge rushers in this draft, and the Bears could be in the market for both. So at least early on in the draft. I know that Talise Fuaga was they had like 8 guys at his pro day last week, and there's plenty of other offensive linemen here that the Bears could be interested in, and I think Jackson Powers Johnson is also a candidate, being that the Bears kind of need a center. They traded for Ryan Bates, who was a backup center in Buffalo that they apparently love, but that looks like who their starting center is right now. So they could trade back, but right now I'm not exactly sure who wants to come up for any of these players. I could see, some of these some of these teams in the later teens possibly coming up for defensive linemen, a Dallas Turner or a Jared Verse, perhaps. But I think the Bears are not going to be getting tons and tons of phone calls to pick after JJ McCarthy goes off the board, or at least ones that are high enough value for them to move off a blue chip type player. Um, for me, I'm going to take Jared Verse here. I think some people might say that's incorrect. Tell us in the comments that they'd be more of a Dallas Turner pick. But I think Verse's ability in the run game is going to be very important for Matt Eberflus and his defense, that he values that a lot. And Verse is kind of the perfect 1-2 in both pass and run stopping. He's actually my favorite edge in this class. I know he's your favorite edge in this class. So maybe this is just our bias on this on top of it. But I'm going to have the Bears taking Jared Verse here at 9.
No, all the conversations I've been hearing are either Dallas Turner or Verse Edge one. Like those are really the only two names that people are considering at this point. So I don't think you're very far off base with that selection. Now I'm up here with the Jets at pick 10. This is another team that free agency has kind of changed the outlook, I guess you'd want to
Yeah.
say, of what this pick is going to look like. Obviously, up to now, excuse me, Jets tackle, big need. They go out, they bring in a Tyron Smith from the Dallas Cowboys.
Right.
They bring back Morgan Moses. He played with the Jets previously, so you
Mm-hmm.
kind of have those tackles secured. You know, you got Elijah Vera Tucker locking down one of the guard spots. You bring in a John Simpson. Like they're bringing in players, you know, to handle that offensive line. We're still waiting on David Bakhtiari to sign with the Jets because we know he will at some point.
Why are we all waiting still?
So now you have options, you know, and so you can go best player available. And for me, the best football player available right now is Brock Bowers. He's sort of like, you know, it's a tight end. We don't know where to slot in tight ends as far
Sure.
as positional value goes, but the Jets need another pass catching option.
Sure.
I think I like Bowers the best over those like tier 2 wide receivers. Like for me, my rankings, I would have, you know, the top 3 receivers and then Bowers and then, you know, tier 2 receivers after that. So I think Brock Bowers is a great selection here, you know, for the Jets to give Aaron Rodgers that, you know, that next level pass catching option that he needs because I mean right now it's what Garrett Wilson, Alan Lazard didn't look too great last year. You know, Xavier Gibson, like it's there needs to be a second go-to receiver, you know, especially in those like third and short situations.
Right.
And Bowers is going to be that guy because the Jets they need this is the year. They need to push it in. They need to go to the playoffs, and this is the year they got to do it. So I think Bowers is the perfect selection here.
All right, let's throw him in at 10. I'm back up here with Atlanta, who've traded back from 8 to 11. And this board kind of fell exactly, I think, how they would have wanted. I think they're looking probably for a defensive starter here. And at 8, I think I would have probably had them slotting in with either Verse or Dallas Turner. That an edge rusher to kind of complete their front on the defense. Was where I would have gone. And now Dallas Turner is sitting right here for you at 11. He is, again, when we talked with Verse, either 1 or 2 in this draft as an edge rusher. He has crazy bend. He's able to get to the quarterback, and that's something that Atlanta is going to want and value. They've started to set up their offense really nicely with what Cousins and the receiving core is, and Bijan Robinson back there at running back. So I think they're going to focus on defense, and I think they are going to go edge because they're going to value that higher for this pick. So I'm going to slot in Dallas Turner for the Falcons here.
All right, awesome. So I am next up with the Denver Broncos, and it's kind of obvious where the Broncos need to go.
Yeah.
Right. Quarterback, like you know,
Yep.
who do they have under center right now? It's not Trevor Simeon, is it?
Jarrett Stidham?
Jarrett Stidham, yes, you're correct. Jarrett Stidham. So the fact that we had to even think about it is
Yeah.
an indictment of how bad the situation is right
Yes.
now. So I've kind of liked Bo Nix for Sean Payton's system this whole way. And I'm not trying to like, you know, fit a player into a scheme and a
Sure.
pick and everything because I also still think pick 12 is too rich for a Bo Nix.
Right, absolutely.
So now does Denver play the game where they trade back and see how far back they can go and still acquire a Bo Nix? And I think they can.
Yeah.
And I think there is a team that would be trading up into the spot right now because I think we're going to start to see a run on a particular position. And this is a position that this team needs to improve going into next season because this team has Super Bowl aspirations.
Yes.
So I think the Philadelphia Eagles are
Yeah.
going to trade up to pick 12 here.
I
And
knew it.
I think you're already on the same feeling of what I'm going to do with this
Yes.
pick. So, as far as what they need to give up, obviously they're going to give up 22, and then they got that extra pick for New Orleans. Pick 50.
Mhm.
I think that's it. I think that just gets it done,
I think that
right?
is too. Yeah. I mean,
It's for there's no it's they're not trading up for a quarterback, obviously, so you don't have that
exactly. That's the
quarterback premium.
difference.
So I think that just gets it done.
Right.
And like I
I know
said,
this is sorry.
yeah,
I know this is all
we're
like
not gonna get. Sorry, you go
this
ahead.
is all like Bears talk that I have from my perspective, but I know when the Bears traded up from 20 to 11 to get Justin Fields, that cost them a future first round pick. But again, like you said, that's for a quarterback. And when it's a
Yeah,
known
yeah,
commodity like that, you have to pay a premium. But I think you're spot on here with a second round pick being enough.
yeah. And like I said, we're not gonna get lost in the sauce about trade value. We're just gotta get through this mock draft eventually.
Yeah. So now you have the Eagles up at 12. So let's look at the board.
All right, so for me, this is an easy one. This is our guy. This is our cornerback
Yeah,
one. It's the number one player in our hearts, Quinyon Mitchell, going to the Philadelphia
absolutely.
Eagles, who desperately, desperately, desperately need corner help.
Yep.
Unfortunately, they made the mistake of paying Darius Slay and James Bradbury last year, and those guys immediately fell off the cliff as far as
Hmm.
skills go.
Right.
You have they keep investing in the defensive line, so they still got one of the best defensive lines in football.
Hmm.
So I think they just really need to shore up that secondary. And it's like I said, Super Bowl aspirations for this
Right.
team. So you bring in a guy who, like we've said in previous shows, he's great playing off coverage. He's great playing press man coverage. He's going to kill it once he gets into this league. So I think that is a great move for the Eagles to help the next year's playoff push.
Absolutely. So I'm up here with the Raiders at 13. I think it was a smart idea for the Eagles to be trading in front of the Raiders as well because they do need secondary help as well for their team. So the cornerback is a position that they may be targeting. It could be a guy like Terrion Arnold, but I think they also are concerned with offensive line. That they know that they're going to need to build up that offensive line again. And currently, we've only had one offensive lineman go off the board with Joe Alt going off. And I think there are several guys on the board here that they would have major interest in. This is kind of a choose your flavor, thing again. Olu Fashanu for a long time was, everybody's second offensive tackle on the board. But I kind of like Talise Fuaga going to the Raiders here. I just think he has some versatility and can play different. He can play either side on the line. And I think the Raiders are going to try to build up the trenches. They made the big signing of Christian Wilkins. They were concerned on getting their defensive line built up. I think they want their offensive line built up too. They know with their current quarterback situation and knowing that they didn't get a top guy at quarterback in this draft that 2024 is probably not their year. So why not continue to build up so that when you do bring whatever your future quarterback is in, that you have a really good line around him. So that is going to be my pick here at 13.
Awesome. Love it. All right. New Orleans Saints at 14. I think we're going to have a little bit of a run here
Yep.
because the Saints are another team that could definitely use offensive tackle.
Yeah,
So I'm going to go with Fashanu here.
for sure.
Him and Alt were kind of 1-2 for the longest time, and Fashanu's kind of taken a step back as we gotten closer to the actual draft itself. But let's not forget, Fashanu is still a great player, and he went to Penn State, so athletic beasts. It's a great move, and it's kind of like exactly what New Orleans needs because Trevor Penning has not really worked out so far. So
Sure.
maybe you take Penning, maybe you move him into guard. It gives you a little bit of options as far as that offensive line goes because let's be honest, they're stuck with Derek Carr for a couple of years. So
Mhm.
they need to just, put a line in front of him and try to get it to work because Carr's not going anywhere.
Absolutely. No, I like the pick here. It's again one of these situations where I think you're kind of stuck with where you're at, and why not shore up that very important area? So now you have the Colts here at 15. The Colts are a very interesting team. There's a lot of different directions I think they could go with this pick. I think defensive back is still on the board. I think interior, like I think, pairing Quentin Nelson with Jackson Powers Johnson in the middle could be really, really fun as far as an offensive line goes, especially with Anthony Richardson being your quarterback. But I'm going to go with the first defensive interior rusher on in the draft, and I'm going to go with Byron Murphy here. I just think the Colts need to make sure that they are getting to the quarterback and stopping the run this year better than they did last year. We saw I think it was week 18 last year. They were playing the Texans for the right to go to the playoffs, and they just had C.J. Stroud throwing the ball and the Texans rolling all over them at home. And you could see that the Colts need help in their defensive side of the ball. You're going to be in a division now with Trevor Lawrence and CJ Stroud. You need to be able to get to the quarterback, and you need to be able to stop the run. So I think Byron Murphy here is a smart pick for the Colts to be rebuilding that defensive lineup.
All right, next up is Seattle at 16. And Seattle's funny because I feel like they just invested in the offensive line and they were getting such a good production, and then the whole unit kind of just fell apart last year.
Mm-hmm.
And we're kind of sitting in the same spot we were at when Russell Wilson was on the team. Remember they're saying like, oh, they never do Russ any favors. They never invest in the offensive line. And I think that time they traded like a 5th-round pick for a veteran.
Yes.
And finally Russ leaves. They invest in the offensive line. Those guys play good, and it's back to square one. So the trenches is where the Seahawks have to attack, and Washington's Troy Fautanu is the guy for me here.
Yeah.
I mean, Charles Cross at left tackle he's decent. He's a capable starter.
Mm-hmm.
So you could have Fautanu like play right tackle, or you go in the camp and you play around with it. But I think
exactly
offensive line investment again is something the Seahawks have to do in this draft.
Absolutely. No, I love the pick. So I'm up here now with Jacksonville at 17. They could be going again. This is another Jackson Powers Johnson potential landing spot, but I actually think Jacksonville historically is a team that likes to take shots on edge rushers that are a lot like Leo Tulatu. And I know that there's health concerns with him, but I think at this point at 17, the upside is worth it for what the risk is with that injury history. And I think that Jacksonville is going to try to bring in another pass rusher with Josh Allen to be able to get to the quarterback. Again, we're in a division with CJ Stroud. We need to be able to stop the quarterback. And I'm going to go with Latu here at 17.
All right. So then we have the Cincinnati Bengals. Joe Burrow is back this year. So what are we going to do to help Joe, to help the Bengals get back into the playoffs? And it's kind of like a broken record, but offensive line. The Bengals once again are looking to invest in the offensive line. The Jonah Williams didn't work out at right tackle. So I think right tackle is the place they need to attack.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Georgia's Amarius Mims is the next guy who's a perfect fit for it. He's huge. Like, he is a big dude, 6'7", 340.
Right.
He's going to be a great addition onto that offensive line. And it's kind of funny because then you got Cincinnati with Marius Mims, and then you got my Cleveland Browns with DeJuan Jones, battle of who's got the biggest right tackle in the AFC North.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I like the pick. Okay, I'm up here at 19 with the Rams. We just saw Aaron Donald retire yesterday. So there is a need now in the interior on the defensive line. I don't know if this is exactly, they're going to feel that pressing need to fill that spot, but with Johnny Newton sitting here at 19, I think that is an option for them. I also think secondary could be an option here, and that's kind of where I think value is starting to show up on here. So I actually think they're going to go with Terrion Arnold here, cornerback from Alabama. Some people have him as their number one cornerback on the board, and he's slipped here now down to 19. I think it's a pretty solid area to be taking a guy of his talent as a prospect for your team in the late teens. So I'm going to go with Arnold here. I think it just boosts their secondary. Again, they're in a division where the ball's thrown around quite a lot, so you need to have good cornerbacks, and that's what they're going to focus on here.
All right. And at 20, I had the Pittsburgh Steelers, and now we're seeing why the Eagles traded up. At the time, it seemed kind of like silly because, they traded up for a corner, and then we went like, tackle run basically. But you have the Rams going corner. The Steelers are going to go corner here as well.
Okay.
I think they're going to go with Nate Wiggins out of Clemson.
Ooh,
Some people
okay.
have him as corner one, which you can see like we've had 4 guys named as corner one so far in this draft class. So it's very tight, the rankings. But Joey Porter Jr. they got last year. I hate to remind you of that. That was the Chase Claypool trade pick. But Joey had a great year, and now now he needs a running mate. So bring Nate to Pittsburgh, and then you got two young corners to help build the basis of that secondary for years to come.
Absolutely. No, I like the pick a lot here. 21, we're here with the Dolphins. The Dolphins have had probably one of the harder free agency periods of any team, having to move a lot of contract and not re-sign several players. And I actually think where they're going to go here is I think this is when Jackson Powers Johnson actually goes off the board. They are losing their starting center from last year. And so I think, I guess Aaron Brewer could be, the starter right away. But I think Jackson Powers Johnson is going to be the direction they're going to go. I know that Mike McDaniels seems like a guy that is all about passing the ball, but he actually has a very long history of being able to run and successfully run the ball. And that's kind of, between San Francisco, where he was at before, and Miami now, we've seen it a bunch with, having kind of a committee of running backs that have had a lot of success. And I think that begins in the interior. And I think a guy like Powers Johnson is going to be a guy that they love on the board. So that's where I'm going to go with him.
All right, so Denver back on the clock with 22. We kind of talked through the pick when we made the trade, but this is where Bo Nix goes.
Sure.
12 felt a little rich for the skill set that Nix has, but he is a good fit with the Sean Payton offensive scheme that they're going to run in Denver this year. So I think 22 is an appropriate spot for Nix. You still get that 5th-year option with him being a first rounder.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like he's going to slot in as a day one starter. But we have to remember, he's been a starter for how long in college? 5 years. Between Auburn and Oregon, so he has plenty of playing
Right.
experience.
Yep.
You get him down to Denver over the summer. He learns the system, and week one starter, Bo Nix, penciled in.
There you go. So now this is Minnesota's second pick, which we originally were kind of thinking, they were getting up to 23 with that trade with Houston to package it in and get to, the top of the draft. Didn't happen, but they still here at 23 now. They've already taken JJ McCarthy in this draft, so we know he's the future with that team. So I think they're going to build in the offensive line for him to make sure that he is protected, that the future is protected with him. I'm actually going to go with Graham Barton here. Graham Barton is a guy that he's listed as a tackle here, but I think he's probably going to move into a guard position. And I think the Vikings need help in the interior of the line. So I think they're going to value that. Barton, when I've watched his tape, is a mauler. He's fun to watch if you haven't seen any of his tape yet. And so Latham might be a guy that I think a lot of people would want to take over him, but I think Barton fits what they need more in their offensive line. So that's where we're going to go with the Vikings.
All right, and then the Dallas Cowboys up with the 24th pick. Dallas has been pretty quiet. They haven't really signed any free agents. They've let most of their free agents walk. We got Deuce Vaughn as the starting running back in that backfield. So running back is definitely a need for Dallas,
Right.
but the first round this year is definitely too early for a running back to be selected. So
definitely.
so look for them to attack that position on day 2, either second or third round. So the next area I'm looking at is the offensive line. Tyron Smith just departed to go sign with the Jets, and we still have I would say at least one good tackle left on the board for the first round, and possibly 2, depending on how you feel about developmental prospects. Honestly, I think Tyler Guyton is going to go in the first round, and I think Dallas is a spot that we could see him land in. That might be a little bit too high, a little too hot. It might be, my Senior Bowl bias that always creeps in, but I think Tyler Guyton is a first round tackle this year, and I think the Dallas Cowboys is where he winds up.
Okay, awesome. So now I am up with the dreaded Green Bay Packers on the clock at 25. The Packers have made some moves in free agency, surprisingly, with kind of what their history of free agency has been. So there are some spots that have gotten filled. I think there was probably a bigger need at safety before Xavier McKinney came in. Offensively, they kind of have pretty much everything's set. They could go tackle here though. And they are a team known for wanting to make sure that their offensive line is always strong and built up strong. But I am going to go with Johnny Newton here, actually, in the defensive line. I think there is need for them to continue to get young and be strong in the defensive interior. And again, the Packers kind of see value in things. And I think Newton is the second best defensive interior lineman on the board in this draft. So I think at 25, they're pretty happy to see him here, and a good talent like that to be able to bolster their defense. So I'm going to go with him at 25.
All right, so 26, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They brought back Mike Evans, they brought back Baker Mayfield. They're, going to run it back in the NFC South. So, how can we help this team, win that division and then
Mm-hmm.
win even further for years to come? I think it's clear we have one player that is way too low right now on our draft board, and that's
Sure.
Cooper DeJean out of
Sure.
Iowa. Another player that many have as corner one in this class. Many have said, oh, he can convert to safety at the next level. We'll see where he slots in, but I think at this point you just take the best player on the board, and Cooper DeJean is easily the best player left available here. So Tampa Bay really, really lucks out grabbing a player like DeJean.
There you go. Arizona's back up for the second time in the first round. If you don't recall, they took Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4. Is it crazy to think that they could double down on receiver in the first round and go Brian Thomas as
It's
well?
funny. I was just thinking that, and
I,
I don't think it's crazy. I
I
don't
don't
think it's
think it's as
crazy at all.
crazy as it might seem, especially with the way the draft board fell here. I guess they could go with a guy like Latham and move him with Paris Johnson already being there, and you could have a really stacked offensive line. You could go with a guy like Peyton Wilson because they do have linebacker needs. But for me, I think
Don't
linebacker.
don't don't draft the linebacker for the Cardinals. That's
Exactly.
that's bad juju. We've
Absolutely. It's
had
bad
too
juju for
many
them
years of that.
historically. That's why I don't want the Bears to draft a North Carolina quarterback. But yeah, it's bad juju. So I think I am actually going to go with Brian Thomas Jr. here.
Love it, love it.
Like we said going into it, they really only have Michael Wilson there. So you've basically re-upped your entire wide receiver room for Kyler Murray here. So Bill's on the clock for you at 28.
Perfect. And we have a run. We have a wide receiver run because Adonai Mitchell, AD Mitchell,
There he
Adonai
is.
Mitchell. I haven't gotten the pronunciations down for these guys yet, but AD Mitchell going to the Bills. Gabe Davis is gone, so you need to backfill that spot. You got Stephon Diggs, you have Khalil Shakir, you got your boy Dalton Kincaid.
Mm-hmm.
We just need to keep reinvesting into that receiving room because everyone's saying the Bills Super Bowl window is closing, and I feel like wide receiver is becoming an arms race in the NFL right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of one of those positions like corner where you always need to invest year over year over year and keep the pipeline fresh. So at pick 28, that's what the Bills do. They keep the pipeline fresh and bring a speedster. Both the Texas kids are super super fast, but AD Mitchell will be the first rounder here to the Bills.
There you go. So now I'm up at 29 with the Detroit Lions, who were very close to making it to the Super Bowl this year. I think while they have some needs in some places that they kind of are going to be concerned more with their secondary right now. And that's why I'm going to look at Kool-Aid McKinstry for them. He at one point was considered the number one cornerback going into this draft class. He's slipped a little bit, but I think the talent is definitely still there. And I think Detroit is looking for, when we get into the playoffs, when we are going to be playing against some of these really good NFC teams, how are we going to stop the pass? How are we going to, limit the big plays against us? And they're going to hope that McKinstry is a true knee biter and can be the guy for them in the secondary. So I'm going to take him here.
All right, so I'm up next with the Baltimore Ravens. Is it crazy to say that the Ravens trade out of this pick?
No, because
I feel like it's such a Ravens front office Ozzie Newsome thing to do.
Sure.
And I actually have an idea. I think there's still a quarterback on the board who might not be a first round talent, but the value of that fifth year option
Yep.
can make the trade worthwhile. So let's look about the Las Vegas Raiders.
Okay.
Trading up to pick 30. So they got pick 44 as their next pick, and 44 to 30. What's that going to take? Like maybe pick 112 gets it done, pick 112 and a future third.
Yeah, that
Um,
probably feels about right.
like I said, let's not get lost in the sauce with the trade value and everything, but um, the Raiders come and get a second first round pick, and they're going to go with Michael Penix Jr., the
Okay.
quarterback out of the University of Washington, who is he a first round talent? Is he not a first round talent? We go back and forth all day, this and that, but the value of that fifth year option, if he does hit, is immense. And Baltimore is a front office that loves to trade back, loves to acquire more draft capital. So I can easily see a team like Las Vegas trying to get back into the end of the first round, to get that maybe quarterback of the future.
Right.
Penix doesn't have to start right away. You got Gardner Minshew there. So, I think it's definitely a move that's a possibility that people should start thinking about, how that could play out.
Absolutely. I love the idea. I mean, I think late in the first round, we definitely could see another quarterback, taken, especially if Bo Nix isn't taken as early, in the draft where we had Denver taking him. There's definitely going to be somebody trying to get in there and get that fifth year option because it's so valuable on a rookie contract for a quarterback to be able to have that additional year. Because you basically get 7 years of control with the salary or
Franchise tag.
the
Yeah.
franchise tag on top of it. So I'm up here at 31 with my last pick with the 49ers. Trent Williams is going to be 36 years old this year. They have to start thinking about the depth of their offensive line. And I think with J.C. Latham sitting here on the board still near the top of the list, of available prospects here, I don't think San Francisco really hesitates all that much of going like, look, we need to make sure our offensive line is set for Brock Purdy. And if we're going to make another run at trying to win a Super Bowl, we need our line to hold up. We can't have Brock Purdy having an elbow injury again in the NFC Championship game. So I'm going to take J.C. Latham here as kind of their future in the offensive line, but also maybe is playing right tackle, swing tackle, kind of in his rookie year and learning from one of the best tackles that's played the game in a long time.
All right, so we have the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs with pick 32, and did we just set a record for tackles to go in the first round? Because I think we're doing another one. Jordan Morgan out of
Sure.
University of Arizona is going to be my selection here for the Kansas City Chiefs. And I had wide receiver pegged in here for the
Mhm.
longest time, but then obviously they signed Marquise Brown, and I think that kind of quenches that need
Sure.
to not where they won't draft one, but maybe end of the second round is a better place for them to target a
Sure.
receiver. So you draft a player like Jordan Morgan here who is played exclusively left tackle throughout his entire career. So you can potentially upgrade that position for Patrick Mahomes and, run it back, as they say.
Absolutely. So that is the entire first round here. As a little recap, we have Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels rolling off the board right away for the top three. Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, Roma Dunze. We go 3 wide receivers after 3 quarterbacks. Joe Alt, JJ McCarthy, Jared Verse. Then we have Brock Bowers to the Jets, Dallas Turner, Quinyon Mitchell, Talise Fuaga, Olu Fushanu, Byron Murphy, Troy Fautanu, Leo Tulatu, and Amarius Mims going. So this is where our run of linemen, whether defensive or offensive, run. And then we have Terrion Arnold and Nate Wiggins, Jackson Powers Johnson, Bo Nix, back-to-back Oregon picks, Graham Barton, Tyler Guyton, Johnny Newton, Cooper DeJean, Brian Thomas Jr., A.D. Mitchell, Kool-Aid McKinstry. Michael Penix Jr. gets into the first round with that 5th-year option for the Raiders, and then J.C. Latham and Jordan Morgan to finish out the first round. What'd you think about overall how the draft kind of fell throughout for the picks you were expecting, Dan?
9 tackles.
Yeah.
We wound up drafting 9 tackles. So I know you and I, we kind of like our visions align as far as roster construction. And, this is a very deep tackle class. So
Mm-hmm.
do I think 9 will wind up going the first round? Maybe not. But obviously after playing out the scenario, we could see that it is very possible.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a combination of, tackle contracts being so expensive.
Exactly.
We talked about in the free agent show that interior defensive lineman contracts have started to get to that way. So the draft kind of mirrors the way inflation is going with these contracts, and it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like a trailing indicator. It's like 3 years after the contract explosion, you'll see a lot of guys go. So I mean, I think we knew going into this that tackle, wide receiver
Hmm.
were two strengths of this class, and we saw a bunch of tackles and wide receivers go. We've talked about this corner class is pretty deep. There might not be like a certain like top guy consensusly, but we saw a bunch of corners go, and each one, every time we said, some people have this guy's corner one. So,
Right.
and
Right.
then
Exactly.
the big talk will be the quarterback class, with their landing spots and where they go.
Right.
Um, I see Caleb Drake starting right away. Jaden McCarthy probably be sitting a while.
Hmm.
Nix will start right away. Penix will sit a while. So you got a good mix of like guys who will see week one and guys who will, spend a little time year one getting a little bit of experience.
Absolutely. I would say looking over the board, we have six quarterbacks going. We have, I believe, five wide receivers going, nine tackles, like you mentioned, and I believe we have five cornerbacks total going. And the one thing I would say about all those positions is we just went through free agency. What is the position that doesn't usually hit free agency, at least at top talent? It's those kind of positions like quarterback and wide receiver on the and tackle on the offensive side of the ball, and cornerback on the defensive side of the ball, and usually edge rusher as well. Those are the ones you're just not going to get premier guys in free agency. So you have to value them a lot higher on your board in the draft. It happens to be a draft that has a very deep tackle class, a very good wide receiver class. So I think a lot of teams saw value in, at least in the later round, saying we're going to take this guy because I think he's probably a mid first round talent. And we're getting him near the end of the first round. And then as far as the quarterbacks go, that's just team need with the Denver and the Raiders jumping up to get quarterbacks kind of later in it, because you can't win without the quarterback. So we're going to take our shot here. So I think it obviously you're never going to hit 100% on your mocks, but I think something similar to this wouldn't surprise me really when we come another month and a half away from the NFL draft.
Yep, we'll be at the draft before you know it. And this is a great time. If you're not, hit that follow button, subscribe, turn notifications. We're going to have a ton of draft content coming up in the next month. Thank you guys for joining us for our first post free agency mock draft. There'll be plenty more for this to come from. You guys enjoy your spring. You have a good one.